I'm Jim Csek with KelownaNow. A big day, and I have with me.
Renee Merrifield and former MLA, but now businesswoman, and just happy to be here today to talk about these exciting election results.
So we're starting off our new show. Renee and I are going to be with you once a week, and we're going to talk politics. And we're starting this on like one of the biggest days internationally that could happen. This is, I mean, they're calling it down in the States the biggest. The Democrats are calling the biggest decision. The Republicans are calling the biggest decision. It is a really big election, the biggest one that I've ever seen. Kind of as how they've built it up.
Oh, and it's been so intense. I think that that's part of it is that the intensity with how the both of the campaigns have run, with Biden stepping out earlier this summer, and really with Robert Kennedy shifting the balance back to Trump, and it has been a very intense campaign over the last couple of months, and something that everyone has followed. It's almost like a great reality show.
Yeah, I know. Like last night, Joe Rogan, for the first time ever, came out with an endorsement at the last minute, like an 11 o'clock endorsement. He came out and endorsed Donald Trump. Obviously, on the Democratic side, they got lots of big names out there. Oprah was out last night, and Obama, and I can't even remember all the names, but like Carly B, and I don't know all the names, but
Jennifer Lopez, like
Jennifer
you
Lopez.
got a
Yeah.
lot. It's definitely been. I even watched two campaign videos, which was, I'm always very interested to see like what do these campaigns want to leave the last impression for the voter. And Kamala Harris's was all about the hope and the American people, and it had all these different voices and obviously celebrities that were voicing over this one ad. And then on Trump's, it was all about him. It was all about him and what he said, and had like, and what he was talking about, and him being, for the American people as well. But really, it was a focus on Trump rather than a focus on the American people. So it was super interesting, both obviously very well done, but yeah, it left me feeling like we need that voice of hope again. I think for the Americans, I think that they're really lacking that, and I definitely thought that the Kamala video struck a better tone that way.
Yeah, definitely it does appeal to the female audience a lot more for sure, right? Like they're showing in the polls.
Like a female, Jim.
No, I'm just saying what the polls are showing. That it's definitely a lot more like they've definitely got a lot more of the female side of the vote, and a lot more of the male vote is towards Trump, and then even the male black vote where you heard Obama call out the black man.
Yeah, and that's been really interesting is to watch them both cater to different demographics, but then also, who they are going after. Trump's been sticking really to his base. He's been going and hitting the rallies, but really for the most part sticking to those that he thinks he's already won, and trying to incite them and make sure that they vote. Kamala has taken a much broader approach. She's really tried to, I think, decide who her audience was, and a little bit later in the game, she's really taken more of the shotgun approach, and that's been very interesting to watch as well.
The one big thing that I get from this is like we've got two wars waging around the world, and it's interesting on how they both portray that, because even CNN went after Kamala Harris last night and saying like she's got two different messages. When she was talking to like a more Arab population, she was saying how we need to protect Gaza and all that stuff, and then when she's talking to a more Jewish audience, and she's like Israel has the right to defend, and CNN is like which message is which, and then Trump made that big statement that he's ending the Ukraine war the day he's elected, basically, right before he takes office. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And it sounds like what he's going to use is the heavy stick of the U.S. military and say, like, you stop now or else we'll come and do some stuff. But I don't know if, because these two wars have been going on for quite a while now.
Yeah, I can't imagine what you would have to do in order to stop a war that you really are not engaged in as of anything other than, military support, especially with NATO involved. So it's going to be very interesting how he actually delivers on that promise if he is elected in today. Having said that, he is a much stronger and much more unpredictable leader, and so I do think that that unpredictability will factor in, and will definitely have other world leaders kind of on their heels rather than feeling like they can lean into what they already know. that bodes well for some of the American people. You know, they want these wars to stop. They want to stop seeing all of those dollars going to foreign aid and foreign, foreign military. You know, they want to see their own military getting those dollars. So I mean, I could see it resonating very well, especially with the male population, as to, you know, just a stronger front on that. And you're right, Kamala has been very mixed messages is the best way to put it, different messages. Now, that's out of Trump's playbook, because I don't know if you remember in the 2020 election, but he literally went around, or sorry, not 2020, 2016 election. He went around at every single rally. He had a different message. Now, this a lot was driven by polls and what the polls were showing in those various locations, but it was masterfully executed by his campaign team in 2016, and largely credited to, his win to that is how he was able to tweak his message directly to the audience that he was speaking to.
I see he stole a page out of Ronald Reagan's book, like his speech there last night. I think I saw it, or the night before, where he just said it's basically all about the economy. Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? And I think that's the message. I think the economy comes back time and time again, and the same thing in Canada. The economy is what's really weighing on people's minds, and I don't think people have a clear idea of what Kamala Harris is talking about when the economy comes, and I think they understand Trump's like drill baby drill, get energy prices down, get food prices down. I think like he does talk to the pocketbook a lot more than Kamala Harris.
Absolutely. The message has been far more retail from Trump than from Kamala. Harris has been all about ideology. You know, she's talking way more about, you know, where you sit or where you stand on certain ideological issues, rather than, you know, what's really important to the American people. What I find so shocking or ironic about the message of the economy is that the US economy has dominated over the Canadian economy. And if you look at, doesn't matter which statistic you want to choose, you know, that whole aspect of, are you better off today than you were yesterday or than you were 4 years ago? Right now, Canada would be, you know, far worse off than anything that Trump is talking about. And yet that is really resonating with the American people.
And if you want to see more on that, we're going to cover that in our daily newscast because Chrystia Freeland is trying to convince Canadians that the economy is doing great, the interest rates are down, wages are up, and people aren't buying it. And Canadian Press did a story on it, just like, you know, like that. It's almost like gaslighting at an extreme level. You're telling people that they're better off than they ever were when they can't make their payments, and they can't, you know, like they can't finish house purchases. I'm hearing from more people now that they've bought, you know, like developments now they can't complete and all kinds of stuff, and now they're stressed and all kinds of stuff like that.
Oh yeah, the emotional stress that the economy is having on individuals, whether you're in the U.S. or Canada, is actually very, very extreme. And those mental health aspects are definitely something that we need to be very careful with, because it's not sustainable. And unless we have a real turnaround, I think we're in for more of the same. So I know that we're not talking about our election, our federal election that's going to come over the course of this next few months. And Bloc Québécois was out again today talking about how they are going to force an early election because the Liberals did not acquiesce to any of their demands. So it's going to be very, very interesting over the course of this next few months, indeed.
So the auto workers typically vote Democrat, but Donald Trump and JD Vance have really sent a message, and they say they're going to tear up that EV mandate. And they've seen nothing but plant closures in the U.S. We're now starting to see them in Europe over these EV mandates. And I did an interview with the BC Dealers Association. It says this EV mandate is going to basically decimate automakers. And so I think the union bosses came out in favor of Kamala Harris, but the workers seem to be coming out in favor of Donald Trump to keep their jobs.
Yeah, the other thing that Trump has promised tariffs for any foreign car making.
Yeah.
That's not going to bode well for our Ontario manufacturers. Indeed, that's going to be a real kick for us. For his base and the people that he wants to, win votes from, it's certainly resonating. I mean, they want their jobs saved, And that's certainly one of the aspects and why he's going after that. I think that the car makers are absolutely correct in that the EV mandates are going to really hurt them. But it's not just hurting them; it's going to hurt the consumer. Our pricing is going to go up. I mean, I'm shopping for my next vehicle, and I'm struggling. On the one hand, it's like, okay, do you get an EV? On the other hand, it's like, I don't want to spend more money than what I need to. And so it's a very difficult decision. And right now, a lot of people can't make that decision. A lot of people can't afford that extra $100, $200 a month on their car payment. In fact, they can't even afford a new car. So I really think that we're in a world of hurt there. And I think that Trump knows that, and he's actually appealing to that base.
And then with the oil and gas industry, we've seen Stephen Jabot come out the other day now with more punishing. And good thing Canada has Danielle Smith fighting back tooth and nail.
That
Donald
is the
Trump
closest I've ever seen her swear, to swearing in a press conference. The guy was like, "Ooh, Nelly, she is getting hot with that language."
She's probably one of them. And they were attacking her and saying her leadership was in doubt, and she's got a 91% approval rating in her own party. So she seems to be doing, she has said she's putting Alberta first. And on the drill baby drill stuff out of Donald Trump, I listened to Bloomberg this morning, some saying this could actually hurt Canada Oil and Gas because he's going to drill more, bring more oil online, which would actually lower the price of oil, which I think that's what he's trying to do. But I think it would also put pressure on Canadian, the government to kind of loosen their strategies on choking off the oil and gas industry.
Yeah, Minister Jabot, I think that the telling thing from that press conference for me was his quote of "no other country in the world is doing this." And for me, that would give me pause. He's touting that as a huge win. I'm touting that as a huge loss for Canadians, for Canadian prosperity. And I think that until our ship is righted, it's not going to matter what the U.S. does. Now, Obama was the biggest hit to Canadian oil and gas. I mean, he turned on the taps to the oil and gas industry. He doubled the production on both of those fronts during his 8 years. So I know that a lot of people love to say, as a Democrat, he's this environmentalist and this, you and I've had this conversation before, so I won't repeat. But I'll go head to head with anyone in some of those green states like California. And, I did with the Minister of Energy and Mines last year in one of the bill debates, because I said, you're touting California as your gospel truth and how we should run our environmental policy. But honestly, the only reason that they do that is because their oil and gas sector is fueling their economy. It's making them the fifth wealthiest economy in the world if they were a solo economy. You can't do that without oil and gas. And so what Trump is trying to do is turn on the taps so that literally the U.S. has more prosperity.
Well, we've seen it over and over again. Nations rich in energy are rich, period. And Stephen Jabot seems to have more of a personal mission than he does in the best interests of Canadians, the way I see it anyway. I think that, he's driving his own ideology of what he wants to see, but it doesn't definitely fit with the best interests of Canadians.
No, it's an imaginary green economy. And I say imaginary because I don't believe that the green economy is wrong. I just think that right now it is only an ideology. It's not been realized in actual jobs or in wealth creation. I think that we could see it if we used our natural resource sector to actually fuel those green innovations and technologies. But until we do, we're just going to dump money into really a pit that's going to be very difficult to get out of. And you're right. I use Qatar as this example of wealth created. A country of 300,000 people. Host one of the world's largest events for billions and billions of dollars. How is that possible? Only through oil and gas. That is what makes them so wealthy.
And I'm a big fan of EVs and solar and all that stuff, but I also recognize that we need to be great stewards of the environment, but that doesn't mean that we need to push everybody into poverty. We should take advantage of our resources while they're still available that people want to use them. I mean, oil and gas will always be around, even if everybody drove an EV, because there's trucks, trains, and tractors. There's plastic is a huge industry, like oil and gas, and plus energy. There's natural gas plants, all kinds of stuff. So this short-sightedness seems to be really linked to like an ideology of like one person. It seems like it makes no sense to me, and I think once we get our election here, maybe we can straighten that out. But let's get back to the U.S. election. Elon Musk and a couple other guys are saying Pennsylvania is the key. And what do you think of that?
Well, I think that, is Pennsylvania the key? Not necessarily. I do think it is a key. You have to, the elections are always decided by these handful of swing states that could go either way, right? And that's like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Arizona, North Carolina, Nevada, and Georgia. Those are always the ones to watch, which way they go and which way they swing. And right now, Trump is narrowly ahead. And I went to, if you want to see a lot of polls at once, real clear polling, and they'll give you a whole list of different polls. Right now, Trump is leading. And we saw that with the BC Lottery Corporation. Do not recommend betting, but but definitely he's given better odds to win at this point. I think specifically because those states are leaning his way. Now, if anything happens with the, with those ones, those are the ones I'll be watching tonight just to see, which way they're going. And other pollsters are saying that no, Kamala is going to come out with a 308 to 230 win here tonight. So we'll see. I think it's too close to call at this point.
Yeah, we did that story yesterday. I didn't know that you could actually go on BC Lotteries and you could place a bet. And I think the odds yesterday were a payout of 1.68 for a bet on Donald Trump, and 2-to-1 odds for Kamala Harris. So Donald Trump, the favorite for sure in those betting odds. It'll be interesting to see how that actually plays out when, like where those odds and how they kind of calculate those odds.
Well, and it's so close right now that you do see. I mean, I talked to last week with the interview with Mario Consego. We talked about the cookie poll that's going on in Pennsylvania bakery, right? The one thing I'm going to be really curious about is Alan Lichtman. He has his prediction that he's been right on every single time since 1994, save only one time, and that was with Al Gore. Now, some would argue that that was the ballots that had the little
hanging chads.
The hanging chad. And so I'm not quite sure if that's why his prediction wasn't correct, but I do think that is definitely something that I could watch. He's predicting that Kamala will win based on his 13 keys. And he has a really great analysis on YouTube where he goes through why those keys are so important and what it means and why he's actually got Kamala with more of them. Now, he's predicted both Republican and Democratic winners. So he actually is nonpartisan, and he's looking at the keys as a more of an objective tell rather than what we would possibly do with in terms of a partisan approach.
Yeah, and if you're watching today, I would advise people to kind of like bounce around, because in the U.S. at least they have they have a far or left media and a right media. Like you can go to Fox and you go to CNN, you kind of go in between those two, and you're kind of find some like balance there. But Canada doesn't really have any of that balance, right? Like on a national stage, right? So. Like I said, you can get some balance by going around. And there's tons of podcasters out there, Megyn Kelly, all those other ones that are out there too. Definitely, like they lean very right. But between that, you can kind of get a clearer kind of like idea of what's going on.
Absolutely. And I love their maps. The one thing that I will say about the big media companies is they've got those maps that are constantly flipping and changing and will show you real-time updates, etc. It's incredible how much Canadians are watching this election. And I don't know if that's true around the world.
Yeah, I would think that around the world, it matters a lot. I would say in Ukraine and Russia, and China, they're all watching this because to them, it's a huge difference. I don't think the last 4 years have like Donald Trump's unpredictability is probably a strength for America too, because they don't know how to take it, because he could do anything at any moment. Whereas like with Biden and that, I don't think they were really that scared. I mean, I think that's why that Afghan withdrawal was kind of like a disaster and all that kind of stuff.
No, and I think that the one thing we need to realize is that there are a lot of people that get elected, and I put that in quotation marks because they get elected with the president. There's a lot of puppeteers that take place, and
Yeah.
those ones on the Trump side, I would say, are less predictable than the Democratic ones. Having said that, you're right. I don't think it bodes very well for the foreign affairs to have something that is so predictable and seemingly less powerful, seemingly less forceful about its way. I don't think that Biden was feared on the political stage of the world. I think that Trump is more so, and I do think that I remember back in 2020 being down in the states and talking with a couple that we had just randomly met at a restaurant, and they were saying that they were had voted for Trump, and I asked them why. I said, because to me as a Canadian, he seems like such a bully. And they looked at me and they said, yes, but he's our bully.
Yeah, I
And
think
I
that's
was,
resonates with people.
yes, that is so true. It's like, yeah, he might be mean, but at least he's mean for me,
Yeah,
like on my behalf. And
yeah.
I don't have to be mean
Well,
because
they've
he is.
clearly got the biggest stick in the world, and he's not scared to use it. I think that's the big thing, right? He's not scared to wield that stick.
And that is something, that statement right there is why Canada has to be very, very concerned. We
Hmm.
don't have a Harper right now who is
Yeah,
strong
or even a
and
Chrétien.
or a Chrétien who is strong, who is
Yeah,
diplomatic, who understands the power
yeah,
of our. And I think that Chrétien actually understood the power of our natural resource sector even better than what Harper did
yeah.
to some extent. So I do think that we need to return to our space and on that political stage. And right now, I don't think we're there.
I think there was a Canadian poll done, and they said that they would rather have Polyev in power with Trump and have Trudeau in power with Kamala, and that kind of makes sense to me, right? Like because both soft and then both kind of like harder line, right? So I think they would definitely talk to each other in a better way.
Yeah, although like I would say like both of Trump and Kamala are both Trump and Harris are going to actually come out and be very protectionistic. They're both
Hmm.
going to try and focus on the American population, the American jobs growth, the American economy, and in order to do that, they're gonna get protectionistic towards other countries, and that does not bode well for Canada. I mean, someone reminded me after our last episode that Kamala actually voted against, as a senator, voted against the
MCA.
USMCA, right? And so
Hmm.
I mean, that's going into renewal here in the
Yeah.
next year and a half, and that does not bode well for Canada. We really got hosed in that last revision, and I think it could happen again.
We try to keep these to about a half an hour, and I got I think two things that I'd like to talk about. I don't know if you have some other ones. The border, that's the big one that Donald Trump is running on the border and saying if you don't have borders, you don't have a country. And then Kamala Harris is now saying she's going to close the borders, but they kind of ran on opening those borders, but she's backpedaling on that. And then there's some worry that if there's this massive deportation, that Canada could be, the recipient of all these people getting deported or running from that deportation.
I think it's a real fear, and I think that we need to be very concerned. Our border is certainly anything but sealed. I know that the Canadian government came out and said that they were going to be really lowering the amount of the immigration numbers and population. That has not been the case. We still see those rising, so we haven't seen them really lower to where they said that they are going to. And having an open border with a country right next to us that's deporting literally millions and tens of millions of individuals could be very detrimental to Canada, where our infrastructure, where our housing, where our healthcare is already so taxed. And I don't say tax from a financial perspective, but from a capacity perspective. So it's definitely something that we should pay attention to, and we should be very concerned about at this point.
Yeah, I think that we have one of the largest borders. We share the largest border, which is basically unmanned. Like, I mean, it's basically barbed wire fence, like a typical cattle fence is really most of that border is, other than when you're driving across in the highway. But I mean, it's a long, long, long border, right?
Absolutely. And there are people or there are places along that border that are known for their egress.
Yeah.
We actually stationed, border patrol at some of those just to like help people across.
There you
It
go.
It wasn't to keep people out. So I think that that's, an area that, Canada being really nice is not going to bode well when if Trump gets in and I mean, you're right. Kamala is taking a harder line with that. I think because she realized that she's losing in the polls on that particular issue, and so she has taken a harder line. I mean, the Texas governor doing that press conference where literally people are streaming
Yeah.
behind and he's like, really? This is a closed border? Like,
Yeah.
I don't see it.
Yeah. Very visual. Very visual. Yeah.
Very visual, and there's a lot of concern. My sister lives in Texas, and there's a lot of concern with those border states that have seen a huge influx of illegal immigration. Immigrants that are coming across without any sort of papers.
So I don't think we need a wall here in Canada. We just need billboards with pictures of Winnipeg in winter, high level Alberta in winter. Just show this is the Canada you're coming to, right?
Well, I mean, we joke, right? We joke, the reality is that we have seen deaths on some of those border crossings because
Yeah.
of the extreme temperatures that we
Yeah.
that we experience here, and the Roxham crossing was the site of a few deaths. Over the course of the last few years, because it gets so cold that if you're not prepared for those winter conditions, they can be very hazardous. So I know that you're jesting, but Winnipeg is the third largest recipient of all immigrants that come to Canada. They've got a lot of head offices. They've got a lower cost of living, a lower cost of housing. So they end up, taking on a lot of that immigration. And we're seeing some of the provinces shut their own borders. Quebec has come out very loud saying we're
Yeah.
not accepting anymore. And so, it'll be interesting to see how other premiers follow suit.
So I don't know if we'll get a result tonight. I doubt if we'll get a final result tonight. It could be weeks. It could be, um, unless it's a landslide. Some people are predicting a landslide, but we'll see. But so I don't think people should get their because it's going to be late too, right? Because the polls don't close in California till late. So it's be very. I guess you'll see some of the eastern states maybe, but there's a lot of votes to be counted.
Yeah, and I think that's why there will be so much attention on those swing states. Who gets those swing states? So as they start reporting, that'll be very interesting. I think you're right. Most of the analysts that I've been reading are saying it'll probably be Saturday before we'll know for sure. Now, having said that, anything can happen, and just like it is with our elections, it's about the electoral
Yeah.
college. And so if those numbers start posting, we could see some earlier results and even a bigger landslide.
I do want to touch on the BC situation. I understand that David Eby is approaching conservative MLAs to get a Speaker of the House, and it sounds like right now there's nobody that's willing to do it. So
Yeah,
that puts his majority into jeopardy, obviously.
yeah. From the conservative insiders that I've been talking to, they've said that everyone's telling him no, no go. So it doesn't look like he's going to get it from there. I think that what's going to happen is the Greens are going to be back in power, back in control, the tail wagging the dog.
Yeah.
I do think that the results will keep the NDP more in check. I think they'll have less opportunity to do some of the things that they intended. But I also think that it'll give the BC Conservatives time to really regroup, to think through how they want to run the next election. And without the independent candidates, I think that we'll end up seeing a stronger BC Conservative vote in the next go if they show themselves to be a really strong opposition and really the voice of the people.
And if they really take a hard look at where they kind of had some missteps, I think too, that would really help. And then it was Horgan's government, the first time he formed government, that he did have a BC Liberal cross to become the Speaker of the House. So I guess they were trying to work that same thing, because the Greens can't do it, right? Because if they do that, then they lose party status, right?
Yes. I don't believe they would lose party status because the speaker doesn't lose his party or her
Mm.
party. But I don't think they would lose party status, but they certainly would not have their vote. That would be the great equalizer. So I think they see that as a less powerful position. The reality is the Speaker of the House doesn't get to vote. It's they are supposed to be very neutral. You're right. In the Horgan government, Plecas was the one that crossed the floor and became independent in order to take that seat, and that was very detrimental to the BC United formerly BC Liberals at the time. Plecas was not, I mean, even by the staff inside the Legislative Assembly, he was not known to be a very fair or very even speaker. It was he was quite reviled, which is not typical. Typically, you want the speaker to be really respected by both sides. And I think Raj Chauhan has been that over the course of the last 4 years. He's been a steadier hand. Sure, he's still NDP, but he's been definitely someone that's tried to take that role very seriously in being more of an even person and loved by all. Very highly respected individual within the Legislative Assembly. So I saw this one meme where it was that this is Raj Chauhan right now, and it's like him all by himself sitting in all these different locations, and it was like, yeah, he's done a great job. There's no reason that he shouldn't be the speaker again, other than it's going to put the NDP vote needing the Greens in order to actually have that.
Do you think the NDP would look for an opportunity, like say if they come across something that really works out well for them, or if they have a piece of legislation they want to pass that's very popular, that they call an election to kind of like get that majority, the real majority back? Or do you think they'll try to run this razor thin majority?
I think they'll try and run the razor thin majority. I think that right now the NDP are not confident that they would win again. I think that they would, that they feel like if those independents weren't there, they would have lost. Vernon Monashee they would have lost by over 1,500 votes, and Richard Stevenson they would have lost by thousands of votes as well. They're hanging on to Surrey Guildford by Gary Begg is like literally by a razor thin number of votes. Like I think the number was like 23 or something. So I do not think that the NDP think that they will come out with a majority if there's another election. And having said that, I don't think the Greens can afford another election. If you look at their fundraising numbers, it was very, very meager. And so that's going to be hard. And they saw their vote slide dramatically in this last election. So unless they had something really powerful, and with two new MLAs, it's going to be a tricky one for them.
How does Sonia Furstenau kind of like stay as leader? And, like, it's obviously she's not getting paid now either, but so how does she like even, be able to do that and still make ends meet, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can get paid through your party. So your party can pay you, or I mean, I don't think that's her first concern. I mean, she's a pensioned MLA, so it's
well, there's that then, right?
there's that. But also, like it's you can definitely have a leader that isn't in the Legislative Assembly. It's just much harder. It's much harder to have that voice, that statesperson that's standing up in those halls over and over and over again, really with that message. And so it will be a tricky time. And she won't have an office in the Legislative Assembly, so she would, really be relegated to somewhere outside of
the coffee shop down the Starbucks down the street.
Well, now that she's moved to Victoria Beacon Hill, it's pretty easy.
Yeah, it's a great place around the legislature, for sure. It's a beautiful area.
Absolutely.
Anything else you want to touch on today?
No, just I hope that everyone enjoys the next few days. It's going to be a wild ride. Yeah. That's
Get
my prediction.
Big bowl of popcorn, like a huge, massive bowl of popcorn. Your favorite beverage, and just sit back and flip through the channels or whatever, however you're watching it on YouTube or wherever you're watching it. I think there's going to be tons and tons of coverage, right? So
totally. And that is a great point. Watch it all. Make sure you flip channels back and forth between CNN and Fox or NBC. Yeah. Make sure that you're seeing it all, because there will be a lot of different opinions out there tonight. And they do have a lot of broad coverage in terms of the left and the right.
It's interesting that one thing you brought up NBC, where they had to do that, give Trump commercial, right? Because they gave that spot to it. ABC and NBC made a couple of missteps in there for sure, right, in some of their stuff, which is unusual for networks that used to pride themselves on journalistic integrity.
I agree. And I think that there's a lot to be analyzed in that in and of itself. These are not mistakes that they just didn't know about. These are calculated mistakes to try and tip the scales, which I think is a pretty dangerous aspect when you see that. Now, having said that, I think that we could learn a little bit from the States in that more companies, I mean, I can't believe how many emails I received saying, this is why we as a company are supporting, so-and-so as president or so-and-so as president. And it was really interesting to see, that there are more actual partisan sponsorships, as it were. So I do think that we can learn a little bit from that, because I think we need to be louder and prouder with how we actually support politics in Canada. But it was that where it contravenes the law, that's where it gets really dicey.
Yeah, if the American election is a Super Bowl, we're probably still playing in like AAA minor hockey.
Well said, my friend. Well said.
Anyway, thank you for today. And next week, we'll probably touch on a little bit of we'll touch on the results of this, obviously, but then we'll talk about where BC's at, and then maybe even a spring election that we're, like Mario Canseco's calling for.
Absolutely. Hopefully we'll know who the speaker is going to be, and if we're going to have a fall session.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for watching Kelowna Now.